Our next speaker is joining us all the way from Brussels. So Ms. Olivia Gamblin is a founder and CEO of Ethical Intelligence Associates Limited, which she will share more about in a while. She is also part of the founding editorial board, AI and Ethics Journal of Springer Nature. Olivia is also a member of the Ethics Review External Committee of Save the Children US and advisory board member at Tech Scotland Advocates. So please welcome Olivia, who will talk about the role of ethical intelligence in the real world.
I thank you for that introduction, Elle. I'm going to share my screen now quickly. So, bit of a background on myself. I am an AI ethicist, so I'm a trained philosopher, or a philosopher by trade, as I like to say. And Ethical Intelligence, we're an AI ethics advisory firm. So I am approaching a lot of these issues, a lot of these dilemmas that sit within our technology and our wider usage of AI from an ethics point of view. So as any true philosopher would do, I'm going to start with the question of what is ethics. Now, I always like to begin presentations with this overarching question of what is ethics, because I often get different answers depending on either where I'm speaking or the audience. It can be definitions from ethics is a moral code, or ethics is a checklist that we have to fill out. Or I think the funniest one I ever got was ethics tells us whether the car should run over a grandmother or a baby. So clearly there is a wide range of answers that you can get to this question. So what I'd like to do is just quickly establish that ethics, very simply, is the study of right and wrong. Now, of course, this is simplified far, far beyond what I know some fellow philosophers would wish me to simplify it. But essentially, what we're doing when we are considering the ethical implications, the ethical consequences of our technology is we're determining, is it right or is it wrong? Are the actions that we are both using to build this technology and then the actions that so come from this technology, are they right or are they wrong? Oftentimes within ethics, there is this subfield called applied ethics. So you have a very high level field called meta ethics, asking questions of what is right, what is wrong, where do these exist? Take a step down, you have normative ethics, which is asking, is this action right? Is this action wrong? And then you step all the way down to applied ethics, which is where AI and tech ethics sits. And that is, in this situation, with this specific piece of technology, is this right or is this wrong? So from here, again, as any true philosopher, I want to answer the question real quick of why ethics in tech. We have heard it used quite frequently as a marketing ploy. Unfortunately now, there is something called ethics washing, where you see a company with a long list of articles written saying, oh, ethical technology is good. And that's about as deep as that article will go. And it's used more as a marketing scheme. So what I want to do is really define why ethics is so important in technology and why it's something that keeps coming back up into the conversation, keeps coming back to our conversations around technology. And it's twofold. First of all, and this is speaking from ethics in tech from an industry standpoint, of course, but ethics works, first of all, as a risk mitigator. So within a technological development cycle, there's something called technical debt. And what happens with that is, as you're building your system and you're making split decisions early on, you can make a decision that weakens your technology, weakens your solution, so that by the time you finish with your development cycle, your solution isn't as robust as it could be. What that's called is technical debt. When you look back on it, there are essentially these holes, so to speak, that you need to go back and fix. Otherwise, as this technical debt builds and builds and builds on itself, there becomes more and more problems, and the risk for your technology failing increases. Now, you have technical debt. There's also something called ethical debt, which works the same. As you're building your technology and you're making these split decisions, a lot of times people can be unaware that the decisions that they're making have ethical implications. And so if these ethical implications and potential consequences are not considered throughout the development of your technology, what happens is you acquire ethical debt. So you start having these holes, these areas, these hot spots, we'll call them, where you have built your technology and, for example, you have labeled your data set, and within that data set, you didn't realize, but there is an unwanted bias. That would be something called an ethical debt, where if you don't go back and fix that, it's later on going to build upon itself, build upon itself, build upon itself, to the point where you have resulted in a large scandal, and the reputation of your company has gone down the drain, so to speak. Or in some situations, it's resulted in a catastrophe, depending on what kind of technology you're using. So what ethics does, the ethical consideration throughout the development of your technology, it works as this risk mitigator by being able to identify that ethical debt and eliminate it throughout the process of your development cycles. So instead of getting to the end of a piece of technology and going, maybe we're not entirely sure about the outcome of this, you're continuously considering and applying the reasoning process of, is this right, is this wrong, throughout the process. So by the time you finish with your technology, it's a robust solution. Now, that is the more doom and gloom side of ethics. What ethics also does is it actually works as an innovation stimulator, which often I have to try very hard to convince someone, because the first comment that I often hear from someone based in technology is, well, ethics is a blocker. It's a hindrance on my innovation. It tells me what I can and can't do, and therefore gets in the way of the technology that I'm creating. That's not true. Actually, ethics is, if used properly, is this beautiful stimulator for innovation, because what it does is it forces us past complacency. If we are only creating technology so that it fits within our technical limitations, we're not actually pushing ourselves to the fullest extent. What ethics does is it works as this guideline. For example, when you are bowling and you have the bumpers that go up on the bowling alley, all it does is keep the ball directed towards where you want it to go. It's not hindering whether the ball gets to the end, to the bowling pins and knocks them over. It's just helping you keep in the right direction. Same thing with ethics. It helps keep you in the right direction. It's not blocking you, it's just helping you get to your end goal. You can think of it this way. You have technical limitations when you go to create a technological solution. And those technical limitations work as the four sides to a box. So you have your four sides, and that tells you what you can and can't physically achieve with your technology. Now, if you create a solution that fits within that box, it's a great solution. I'm not docking that at all. But as soon as you add on the layer of ethical limitations, what you can and can't do ethically speaking, that 2D four-sided box suddenly becomes this three-sided box. So now you have a better understanding of where your technology needs to lie. You have a better definition of, my solution must fit within these sides of the box, but it's not just 2D, it's 3D. I have a better understanding of what I'm trying to create. And so with that, you're actually able to target and create far more robust and well thought out solutions. So really, at the end of the day, ethics is an innovation stimulator. You have to be creative in order to fit within these guidelines. So these are really the two main reasons why ethics is so important in technology. It works both as a risk mitigator and an innovation stimulator. Now, we've answered the what is ethics. We've answered the why ethics. Let's look at the how now, because this tends to be the place where people start to struggle with, okay, I want to do good, so to speak, by my technology. I understand what ethics is, but how do we take something that is essentially this gray field and apply it to something that is so black and white, such as artificial intelligence. Now, there's a current misconception that AI ethics can be solved by a list of values. We see this with policy guidelines and corporate values, where it's here's our list of 5 ethical principles and we're done. That means we've solved AI ethics with our technology. We're done. It's all good. But actually, as Alessandra was saying, ethics is not something that can be algorithmically deduced. It's not okay, I'm going to magically plug in transparency into my algorithm and we're good to go. What is so vital about ethics when it comes to technology is understanding this list of values, that they again work as your guidelines, but then moving from this list of values and applying it. And I want to actually use an example now just to highlight the fact that even though you may have a robust list of values, let's say the challenging part, the part where you really need the strong approach to, is actually in the application of it. So what I'm going to do is tell you a story. But before I tell you the story, let's take a quick look at the 4 values that are listed on the UK's guidance on using AI in the public sector. Now, I just want to make a quick comment. Ethical Intelligence, we are a Scottish-based enterprise, which is why I'm going to speak through the lens of the UK guidance. However, I recognize that this is a Western set of values and so may not be applicable fully in all cultural contexts. But for right now, we're going to use this as the current example. So looking at this, the guidance for the UK on using AI in the public sector, this is a public document. They have 4 main values. And as you can read here on the screen, it's respecting the dignity of individuals, connecting with each other sincerely, openly, and inclusively, care for the well-being of all, and protecting the priorities of social values, justice, and public interest. Now, these are the 4 points that the UK advises a piece of technology must always follow. Now, keep these in mind. We're going to come back to this. Now for the story I promised. So imagine that you are working for a university, a well-known university, and you are working in their IoT department, and you are a data scientist. And one day you have your boss come to you. Your boss is going, "Hi, I have an idea. I really want to help with the student mental health, with the students' mental health here. Do you think we could create a system that could spot mental health warnings in our students based off of the different data that we have to collect just in general for our students, on our students?" You're sitting there and you're going, "Okay, let me look technically into this." So you start digging and you uncover that, okay, technically speaking, all you need is the data on the students' grades, their library attendance, and their class attendance. So you realize that you don't actually need much data in order to be able to predict a student's mental health. So you start developing and you start looking at the system. You go, okay, this is technically feasible. But then you're sitting there asking yourself, well, ethically, should I be creating this system? Now, you have 2 choices. Either A, you can create this system because it has such strong potential to really help students. There is, in general, a student mental health crisis that universities are looking at. How do we approach this? How do we manage this so that we can better help our students? And you're thinking, well, if the university could have the potential to spot a mental health warning and then reach out to the student, well, that would be a great help to the students. But on the other end, as you're sitting here thinking, well, that is actually highly sensitive information on the student. Maybe the student doesn't want to have their mental health tracked at all, and that would feel like a violation to them, even if someone was able to reach out to them. So you're sitting here going, I can either A, create it and potentially help students, or B, I could not create it because that's an invasion. That's something that's highly personal and sensitive to the individual, and you're drawing out that information just from their class grades. Well, pause a moment here and have you think, would you choose A or would you choose B? Of course, this is much more fun live, because then you can actually see the hands and you can judge your neighbor. But I'll give you a moment just to consider this. Now, those of you who chose A, you're correct. And those of you who chose B, you're also correct. What's happening is each of you has chosen to prioritize one value over the other. So remember the guidance that we went through beforehand. These are two of the values that were on the guidance. And we're the care for well-being of all and respect of the dignity of individuals. What's happening is those of you who chose A, you prioritize the value of care for the well-being of all above the other three values. You have decided that, okay, no matter what, that is my end goal of reaching, I want to care for the well-being. And if this system has the potential to care for the well-being of the students, I must create it. Whereas on the flip side, if you chose B, respecting the dignity of individuals, you looked at prioritizing this value above the other ones. And what you were thinking was, well, I need to respect the fact that the individual may not want this invasion of their privacy, and so I need to be able to step back from that and allow them the space to be able to determine, have their own agency and autonomy over their data. Now, the reason why these are coming into conflict, this is called an ethical conflict, is because these two values sit within the same priority level, within the same value set. This is what I meant when AI ethics can't be solved by just a list of values. Because what happens is if you don't actually create a robust framework behind these lists of values, then you run into situations where you are creating an ethical conflict between two different principles. What happens is you're not sure how these principles, how these values prioritize against each other. You don't know how they apply in specific situations. So this is all to stress that ethical values that you find from policy and corporate guidelines are a great first step, but applying those values is where the real world situations come into play. You're moving out of this lab and out of these theories, and you're actually moving into real life decisions. And how now we're returning back to the how question. How do you make sure that you're able to apply those values, that you're able to overcome these ethical conflicts, as we saw, between different value sets? Now, there are two main approaches that often we at Ethical Intelligence work, especially with our clients, to help apply. But in general, this is how the community looks to apply these values, and that is through internal governance and education. Now, the best solution is to have a combination of both of these. Of course, oftentimes that's not feasible depending on the size of the organization. If you are a large corporation, then you are going to tend towards top-down governance. And what I mean by top-down governance is an ethics code of conduct. So you establish your set of ethical values, you pull those from either policy or you have a corporate set, and then you build a robust framework out of that. And what that looks like is, from a managerial standpoint, you have your different processes, you have your check-back systems, you have, it doesn't work as checkboxes, but you have your ethical checks built in throughout the life cycle of your development product life cycle. So what you can do is check in with the people that are building this technology, and you're going, okay, is this really the right technology that we want to be creating? Is it really having the impact that we originally set it out to do? Perhaps you get halfway through the development of your technology and you realize, oh, there's been mission creep, it's changed over time, and actually this isn't what we wanted. This isn't what we originally intended our technology to do. now you can go back and reconsider those ethical implications throughout it. So top-down governance is a heavy emphasis on creating a charter and framework system within the company. And this is very, very common. This is the preference of larger corporations because it allows this kind of standardization a bit. Since it's so hard to keep an eye on all the different moving pieces, this allows a central point of contact for those ethical considerations. Couple that with this bottom-up education. This approach, specifically the education side, is the preference of our small, medium enterprises and our startups because it's not as much of a time and financial investment as the framework, so to speak. But instead, this approach is we are going to educate our engineers, we're going to educate our programmers so that as they're building the technology, they know to constantly be asking themselves these questions, and they know the instances in which they must bring up to their manager or to, in the case of the startup, to their other team members saying, hey, you know, we need to reconsider this. There seems to be something off here with this piece of technology or with the decisions that we're making. So the best possible solution is a combination of both, because what happens is it creates this overarching framework, this overarching methodology that allows a company and organization to stand in a standard manner, be able to check back on the ethics, while having the employees educated and understanding why they are doing this process, instead of it just being a checkbox. So really the how solution of how do we apply our ethical values beyond just that list of value sets is looking at this from a governance and an educational perspective. So in quick summary, what is ethics? It's the study of right and wrong. Why are we applying it to technology? Well, that is to mitigate ethical risks and increase innovation in our companies and in our technical solutions. And how? We do that through a combination of this top-down governance and bottom-up education, both of which are targeting taking these lists of ethical values and actually applying them to specific situations. Again, it's not an algorithmically deduced process, but it takes critical analysis. It takes, as actually Alessandra was saying, our bravery to be able to look at a piece of technology, address our humanity in relation to it, and move forward with our solutions. So feel free to get in touch with us at Ethical Intelligence. Here are the different manners by which you can reach us. You can also feel free to reach out to me at Olivia Gamblin on LinkedIn or Twitter. I love to chat and I'm very responsive.
All right, so thank you so much. Thank you, Olivia. That was an insightful presentation. So that was Olivia Gamblin joining us all the way